commander of Jeb Stuart Camp 1506, Sons of Confederate Veterans in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and vice president of the Philadelphia chapter of the Heritage Preservation Association. On Veterans Day, November 11, 1995, these two organizations held a joint meeting in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It became a weekend-long event, and members of both organizations came from 7 states, from New York to Georgia, mainly to see the speech you are about to see. The speaker for the evening was P. Charles Lunsford, national spokesman for the Heritage Preservation Association and Georgia Division spokesman for the Sons of Confederate Veterans. Charles' reputation as a defender of Southern heritage, debater, and public speaker are well known. Everyone expected some fire and brimstone that evening. However, no one was quite prepared for the thunder snowstorm, including an eerily well-timed thunderclap, which transpired that evening. We hope you enjoy the talk, but more importantly, we hope it makes you think about your heritage, and we hope it will inspire you to do all in your power to help preserve your heritage for future generations.
A very rare visit north of the Mason-Dixon line, and we're very fortunate. How many of you here have seen the film Braveheart? I just want to mention this because there's something in there that's very poignant. I think it's something we can learn from. William Wallace was a commoner in Scotland around the year 1300 during their war for independence. And some of the nobles were perplexed why the men so adored this commoner who had no title. And one of the nobles in the film, one of the nobles said to Wallace, "Why do all the men follow you? You have no title." And Wallace looked a little bit perplexed, and he says back to him, "Well, men don't follow titles, they follow courage." And the reason I mention that little anecdote is because many of you may be unaware that Charles Lunsford has never held office in either the SCV or the HPA. Men don't follow titles, they follow courage. Now let me just say something, a little something about courage. At the risk of embarrassing Charlie, I know he hates this kind of stuff. I think it was a great act of courage when Charles went on Larry King Live and debated Governor Zell Miller over the Georgia flag issue. I mean, think about that, going on national television live, debating a slick politician who has a PhD in American history. Now, Charles isn't a historian, and he's not a politician, but this was his duty, and he didn't back down, and he not only did his duty, he did it well. He made the governor look very badly. The other thing I wanted to point out, there's another thing that kind of stands in my mind that causes me to have great admiration for Charles. In Raleigh, North Carolina, a few years back, there was a Confederate Flag Day ceremony to be held at the monument. The day before the ceremony, the Confederate gravestones were vandalized and the monument was desecrated and death threats were issued. Charles could have backed down and chose not to speak, but he didn't. He went there and he spoke, even though the governor had to call out the National Guard to protect him. And this is devotion from someone who has never sought to hold office in the SCV or in the HPA. This is living proof that men follow courage rather than following titles. I want to say something about courage. You know, these medals do not indicate courage necessarily. Many of the people who wear the medals have great courage, and Elliot Cummings is living proof of that. But that's not where courage emanates from. It doesn't come from ribbons, it comes from inside. The word courage is based on the French word for heart, because it comes from inside. So I think there's something to be learned from that. We should not assume that just because someone has ribbons that they're a good leader, or that just because someone does not, that they are not a good leader. And we can all do our duty, whether we wear ribbons or not. We should all find what we do best and do it, and to not be afraid of the consequences, because really that's what courage is if you boil it down, isn't it? It's just doing your duty, even if it's uncomfortable or boring, or you'd rather do something else, or if it's downright dangerous. So that's why I say we are really fortunate to have Charles Lunsford come and speak to us today, because men don't follow titles, they follow courage. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you, and it is a very high honor for me to present to you, Mr. P. Charles Lunsford.
Thank you all a lot. I've been amazed at the hospitality I've received. As he mentioned, this is my first crossing of the Mason-Dixon line ever. I'll get louder, don't worry. I have been to the West Coast, and I've been to Wisconsin. I've just never technically crossed the Mason-Dixon line before. I usually start out a program like this with a lot of levity and jokes and such as that, but I don't think I can top what's already been said tonight in that respect. And besides, I'm not inclined to do it tonight because, you see, my program tonight is going to be different. Because, you see, I'm angry. And I'm going to talk angry. So there'll be no more laughs from here on out. You know, we Southerners, and many Northerners, so many I've met today, tend to look at the current day and into the future from the long pipeline of our ancestry. We draw upon our ancestors to look in the future and at today. And you know, sometimes you sit and think, well, gosh, you know, my parents were alive when I was born, and their parents were alive when they were born, and we're a continuation of those same folks over millions of years. And we kind of do look at life through the pipeline of our ancestry. With that in mind, I share a lot of ancestry with most of the people in this room. We are all of similar culture and bloodlines. As I look around the room, I can tell by looking, but I know it because of our culture and where we're from. And I'll have to use my own family as an example because I don't know yours specifically. But I can look back into the distant reaches of the early Middle Ages to my earliest known ancestor. He was an Anglo-Saxon warrior named Engelram. One time in 1066, he stood up for what he believed. And he was killed at the Battle of Hastings, trying to prevent William the Conqueror from taking England. He was defending an invasion of his people, fighting for King Harold the Saxon. And he died doing his duty, trying to maintain his independence. Larry mentioned William Wallace of Scotland. I'm a descendant of the 21st generation from him. And William Wallace died the most horrible death you could ever die, trying to seek freedom for his people, that even today is not yet realized. Later on, in another branch of my family, some of you Highlanders might recognize I'm part of the Clan Gregor. And the Clan Gregor, it was the most persecuted of all of the Scotch Highland clans. 3 times, they were ordered exterminated by the kings of England. That family is popularized in the movie Rob Roy. They weren't exterminated, but they were driven all over the world. One of mine came here. And I call to mind another of my ancestors who fought in the English Civil War. His name was Sir Thomas Lunsford. He's my 9th great-grandfather. He fought on the side of Charles I, who was beheaded, and a price was put on the head of my ancestor, and he had to escape with his life to maintain his freedom. So he and a group of his friends came to Virginia, and the Virginians called them the Cavaliers. And they were fighting against Cromwell's persecution at the time. And I recall another ancestor, Francis Lee of Jamestown, who was imprisoned after Bacon's Rebellion, the uprising against the royal authority of Sir William Berkeley. Finally, I get to an ancestor who actually won. My ancestor, Augustine Lunsford, who fought with the Virginia Continental Line in the American Revolution. I do have an ancestor that won. And as a result, out of all those generations of losses, we had a victory. And do you know what we did with that victory? We created the greatest thing that's ever hit the world, just because we won. Makes you wonder what would happen if we'd won some of the others. Yes, we created the U.S. Constitution and a form of government for the first time devoid of monarchs. And we created the plantation system, which was the most perfect form of cultural life. It is what generated the great minds that created the Constitution. It was the mill that produced these great people. It had something for everyone, the plantation system did. Not everyone is born to be a PhD in history. Some people are born to build houses. On a plantation, if you didn't like to read and write, you could build houses. Or you could grow food, or you could make shoes, or you could find some way to fit in. Other societies, later and prior, didn't have that. Even today, in many parts of the United States, we have an epidemic of teen suicides because so many people make their children feel like failures if they don't make all A's and become lawyers. But we don't do that to our children here, do we? But you know, it came on down a few years later. We got back into our losing because my great-grandfather, Andrew Lunsford, was a private with the 36th Georgia Regiment, Army of Tennessee. He was captured under Pemberton at Vicksburg, and he signed the oath of allegiance to the U.S. They let him go. He got right back with his unit at Chattanooga, and he fought all the way down through North Georgia, even in his own backyard when he reached Atlanta. He was captured again, sent to Fort Delaware. The reason I'm angry is because my people have been through a lot. My people have been through a lot. My own father was in the Battle of Okinawa, and all of his friends were killed. I'm named for two of them, Harry Johnson and Charles McDonald. My people and my own family, as an example, have suffered a lot over the generations. And here we are today. I live in downtown Atlanta. If I put the cross of St. Andrew on my truck, a brick would go through the window of it. My people, in this day and time, are still under proscription. When I first joined the SCV, back in the early 80s, 82 I think it was, believe it or not, there was no persecution of Confederates. We could have a parade and nobody said anything about our flags. Nobody was ever kicked out of school for showing a Confederate emblem on their shirt. And then, in 1986 and 87, the NAACP made it their cause to completely eradicate the culture of my people. They started a petition drive to eradicate Confederate symbols from all public places. In 1991, they upped the ante. They passed a resolution at their national convention calling the cross of St. Andrew, an odious blight on the universe that must be eradicated. The chairman of the board of their organization said, that's not all of it. We want all of it removed. We're going to have the statues taken off courthouse squares. We're going to sandblast Stone Mountain. Now here I was, innocent, a nice guy, meant no harm to anyone, whose family has been suffering for many centuries, and I had to look these people in the eye that wanted to eradicate my culture. That's something that'll motivate you. That'll motivate you. I don't care about running for office in anything. Neither did William Wallace. You just have a duty to do, and you do it when it comes upon you. You don't ask for it. You'd rather not do it. You have more important things to do. I'd much rather march in parades with my flags and jive with my friends till the wee hours of the morning and enjoy fine cigars. But the battle was brought upon us. Think about it, folks. Our ancestry, going back into the dawn of recorded history, has never wanted but one thing. One simple thing. That is to be left alone. You leave us alone, we're the best neighbors you'll ever have. But they just can't leave us alone. So we have to continue fighting generation after generation. Now, I thought it was a jolly war when it first started back in the mid-1980s. I said, let's fight them. Let's go. We enjoy a good fight in the South. So we did. We debated them on television. We went to colleges. We met them everywhere. Earl Shinholster, the head of the NAACP, and I were a roadshow. We were on network television. We went to colleges, everywhere. It wasn't getting them anywhere. They weren't doing well at these events. And so they quit debating us. Then they started working through legislation. They're going to get legislatures to ban Confederate symbols. That's when we formed the HPA and decided we needed a political organization that could fight them politically. And we've whipped them just about everywhere in that arena. So they turned around and they went to court. Right now, we've been in a dozen court cases in federal and local courts. We're 11 for 12. We're doing very well in that arena, costing them an awful lot of money because our attorneys are working for peanuts. And I don't say that lightly. I'm from Georgia. But then things started getting a little nasty. We started getting calls on the phones telling us bad things. We put up billboards and we would come back the next day and there'd be black paint spread all over them. We had a child in Carrollton, Georgia who was beaten severely because she had a Confederate flag hanging from the mirror in her car. And then a Jewish friend told me nervously one day, Charles, don't you see what's happening? Don't you see what's happening? And I said, what? I'm still the Jolly Warrior. He says, this happened to my people. And I got a little cold feeling. He said, yeah, it starts this way. They first have to make you a lesser citizen than they are. So they ridicule you, they make fun of you, they make fun of the way you talk, they make fun of your symbols. And he says, don't you see that's been happening to you? And I said, gosh, you're right. I was raised on the Beverly Hillbillies and the Dukes of Hazzard and Gomer Pyle. Where are all the Southern gentlemen? He says, and they go through that for a period of time until everybody agrees that Southerners really are less than everybody else. Jews really are less than everybody else. everybody agrees on it after a while. You've vilified and ridiculed the people sufficiently for a sufficient amount of time until it's okay to talk bad about them. Comedians get on national TV and ridicule us, and nobody editorializes against them. He said, don't you see where this is getting? He says, he told me this because of an event that had happened. I had told him that I had gotten a letter from someone in a northern state who had a rock thrown through the back of their car window because they had an SCV sticker in the window. And this Jewish friend of mine says, have you ever heard the word Kristallnacht? I said, no, what's that? The night of the broken glass. He said, it's when the Nazis turned up the heat and started breaking our windows out. I said, Charles, you're getting your windows broken out now. Next, they're going to start killing you. And I said, hey, come on. You know where I'm going with this, don't you? In January, Michael Westerman was gunned down in Tennessee because he had a Confederate flag. He was murdered because of his Confederate flag. Apparently now it's even okay to kill these people because everybody's told them it's okay to hate them. And because it's okay to hate them because they're stupid. I'm not going to stand up here and say I don't mean to depress you. I mean to depress you. Because it's true. With all of our levity and fun having, you need to know that we are under proscription here. This has happened before. Don't be ignorant of the history you are living through. You just don't get to see 10 years from now. 20 years from now, you'll see 10 years from now. It could get bad or it could get good. We don't know where it's going, but we know where it's gone in the past. We must be mindful of this. You know, the one beautiful thing about my people, and I mean that as Anglo-Celt, not just Southerner, which I guess just about everybody in this room is. My people have been through a lot. And somehow, through all of this, God put us in the best place in the world. We got the promised land. That's why we don't want to go anywhere. Southerners are content to be here. It's the most beautiful place in the world. We got the best weather, usually. We have the best terrain, most beautiful trees and plants, most beautiful people, most beautiful women, finest whiskey in the world. We really have it all. And perhaps it's just jealousy, and has been for centuries, on the behalf of other people who want something that we've got. Well, they could have it if they just get their mind right, because it's all in your mind. You can become one of us, even if you're not born here. You know, I heard a saying several years ago, and I'm not going to tell you who told me that. It's irrelevant, but it would embarrass me to. But the old saying is, you can chase a dog all day long, and he'll run from you till you chase him back to his own front porch. Then he'll turn around and bite you. And we've been chased around a lot. We have. And most of us are getting to a point now where we're near about tired of running and being chased. So that's why you see people standing up. Not because we chose to do it, but because duty came in our face. And we had to. We were honor bound to do it. You know, a couple of years ago, I was speaking at the grave of Nathan Bedford Forrest, one of my favorites in all of history, not just the Confederacy. And something came over me that day. I don't know what it was. It must have been General Forrest. I was scared. And there was an Associated Press reporter sitting right in front of me. There's about 1,000 people there. It was a good crowd. But I saw her press pass on her pocket. And my whole talk got to be me to her. Because part of our problem is the means of media that has done this to us. So I told her something. I just blocked out the crowd and just looked at her and I said, look, I want you to get on the television or write in your paper something for me. We are a good, kind, gracious, fun-loving people, we in the South. After all we've been through, we are still nice, kind, gracious, fun-loving people. You don't believe me? After what we've been through, if we weren't good, kind, gracious, fun-loving people, we would have something here in the South that would make the Middle East look like a cakewalk. The South is the most militaristic region and the most powerful empire that has ever existed. Had we ever broken down into the kind of trouble they have in Northern Ireland or in the Middle East, God help us for what would have happened. But we didn't. And I dare say we couldn't have. Because we have for centuries endured terrible hardship and come right back because we're good, kind, gracious, fun-loving people. And I told the reporter, why don't you tell that on your media? Why must you come to the South, find our peasants, and put them all on television all the time? Why do you do this to us? You don't do it to any other group of people. And you could do it to any of them. But you only do it to us. Why do you do it to us? And she was getting very small in the chair by then. And I told her, I said, look, the United States of America owes us something, us Southern people, something. They owe us big time. And we want payment. And she was sitting there wondering what in the world I was going to say next. They owe us big time. Because after all they did to us, they put down our independence movement, which is contrary to what their own grandfathers had done in seeking independence from Britain. Not only did they put down our independence movement, they invaded us, stole everything they could and burned the rest, and then held us out of the voting booth for a decade, wouldn't let us serve on juries or run for political office, all the while putting their own stooges in our state legislatures to completely loot them for a decade. It's no wonder we got on the verge of breaking down a little, and we got a little angry. But we got over it rather quick. We calmed down because we're good, kind, gracious, fun-loving people. And we actually made up with those people, as Lee called them. Fought world wars with those people. Became brothers with them again. But the United States of America owes us something for all of that. What is it? They owe us respect. They owe us respect. If they're going to send people to sensitivity training for other groups, they need to send them to sensitivity training for us. How dare they tell our children they can't wear our symbols on their shirts? They owe us respect for what we've done for this country and for the world. I told the reporter, I said, look, you know, it's only a flag, it's only a symbol. I've heard that before. A Polish reporter called me one time wondering what the flag flap was about and says, "Why do you love it so much? It's just a flag." And I told him, I said, "You got a lot of nerve. You were under Soviet domination for decades, and all you had was your flag. You had no freedom, you had nothing." He says, "Yeah, you're right. You know, you can be a POW, stuck away in Burma in a little hut that they put you in made out of bamboo, out in the rain, day and night for months, and have absolutely no hope that you will ever see the U.S. again. And you can reach in your pocket and clutch that little flag." I said, "I got my flag. At least got my banner." There's no reason for those people to demand that we put away our flag. It doesn't have to mean anything to them. It doesn't have to mean anything. What meaning does the flag of Burundi have to anybody in here? They say it means a lot to them. They're lying. They made it up. Why did they make it up? One reason and one reason alone. They just want to hurt us. Purely and simply. The reason they can't just ignore our symbols and let us be, leave us alone, is because they don't want to leave us alone. They want to hurt us. It's done on purpose for reasons of vengeance and hatred. Call their hand on it. Now, we in the South did not enter this latter part of the 20th century as secessionists. We entered it as good Americans that were willing to fight the world wars of America. Things don't change, however, we may leave the 20th century as secessionists. And I made a promise to the little Associated Press reporter. I told her, I says, "Look, put this on AP." And God love her, she did. I got a lot of flack for it. But I said, tell those people who want to eradicate every vestige of our culture that that's all we've got. That's all we've got is our pride. They can't have that. If they absolutely insist on that, they simply can't have it. All they'll get is a fight. I said, if they want to live in peace and harmony with us, here we are. We're a good, kind, gracious, fun-loving people who can accept just about anybody. And we're willing to. But if the price of that is giving away that little flag that we clutch, then they can't have it. They can't have it. Not one more will we give up anywhere without a fight.
How did you do that, Charles?
I didn't. But if what they're telling us, if they're looking us dead in the eye and they're saying, "I'm sorry, we can't live with you and your symbols. You've got to put your symbols away or there's going to be trouble." And by God, there's going to be trouble. Thank you.